Hey guys, welcome to Free Coding. In this video, we're gonna discuss about while loop here. You must have, come across situations where you want to repeat a particular task for different number of times. So in order to do that simply, you'll have to depend on using loop. And there are different kinds of loop. You have for loop, you have while loop, you have do while loop. For this video, we're gonna stick with while loop. I'm gonna take you through few examples on how you can use while loop in different situations. But when it comes to while loop, there are three things you have to keep in mind, again depending on the situation here. So if you know how many times the variable has to repeat, so the three things that you have to keep in mind is, first thing is you have to initialize a variable. You need a variable, and to keep a track of how many times the loop is repeating, so you need a variable. And second thing is, if you're gonna depend on or if your loop is gonna depend on that variable, so that has to be your condition. Second thing is your condition. No matter what, the condition is important. And third thing is you have to update that variable. So these are the most common things that would work in multiple situations. All right, so that's what I'm gonna do here. So first of all, our first task is to print numbers from 1 through 100. And to do that, make sure you initialize a variable with a number. And what am I going to initialize it with? With 1, because I'm going to start from 1. So that's the first data I'm going to print. So I'm going to store 1 inside it. And what am I going to repeat here? The repeating part is nothing but printing. I'm going to print different stuff, but I'm still going to print, which I can control, right? So I'm going to print the variable x, because that's the variable that's gonna go from 1 through 100. So I'm gonna print x. I'm gonna make sure x is keep changing every time. So it's gonna be 1 and then 2 and then 3, keeps going until it reaches 100. And in the next line, I'm going to write my loop condition here. So loop condition is nothing but, since I'm going to use while loop, make sure you write the while keyword here. Followed by that, write the condition. And what's my condition here? Again, focusing on how many times I want to repeat. I want to print 100 times, and I want to print numbers from 1 through 100. So as long as your x is lesser than or equal to 100, I should keep printing it, right? Once it reaches 101, I don't want to print that. I want to print only till 100. So that should be my condition here. So x lesser than or equal to 100. This is one of the operators that we have seen. And followed by that, make sure you write your colon. So here, talking about the syntax, you don't need any parentheses to enclose your condition. Also, you don't need any curly brackets to create the block of code that has to repeat. But what you can do is, you will have to make sure you're using indentation in the beginning. Indentation is nothing but spaces in the beginning. So the number of, if there are certain number of lines that gonna repeat within the loop, or that has to come within that loop, you have to make sure you have proper indentation in the beginning, a proper space in the beginning. That would be a tab space or 4 spaces. And I'm gonna print x. And followed by that, the third step that I talked about is updating your variable. If I don't update this line or the variable, what would happen is your x would always be 1, and your interpreter, this condition would always be true. So your interpreter would get into an infinite loop and gonna keep printing 1 on and on and on again. The loop, your system would get stuck. Or you would have to interrupt the code by clicking on the interrupt kernel button or the stop button to stop your code. So in order to avoid that, you make sure you update your variables. And what I'm going to update it with is by increasing it by 1. The reason is, I'm going to go from 1 through 100. So each number I'm going to print from 1 through 100. So I have to print 1, increase it by 1, that would become 2. So I'm going to print 2. Increase it by 1 again, print 3. So I'm gonna increase it by 1. So that's what I have written here. And I've used additional assignment operator, as you know that it represents x equals to x plus 1, increasing x by 1 and updating it back to x. Now if I run this, you can see it has printed numbers from 1 through 100. There you go. So what would happen is, at what point your interpreter would exit from the loop is, as soon as it prints 100, its x is gonna become 101. And once it becomes 101, again, your interpreter is going to go back to loop and check for this condition. X is less than or equal to 100. This time, it's not, because your 101 is not less than or equal to 100. So this condition would become false, and that is when your interpreter is going to exit from the loop. Now, moving to the next example here. So again, I'm going to go from numbers 1 through 100, but I'm not going to print all the numbers here. I'm going to print only the numbers that are divisible by 5. So again, you have to focus on the 3 steps that I told you earlier. First step is make sure you define your variable. I have done that. Again, I've defined or as initialized it with 1, initializing x with 1. The reason is I'm going to start from 1 and check till 100. All right. So 1, and my condition again, my loop condition is while x is less than or equal to 100, because I'm going to check the first 100 numbers from 0 to 100. So there you go. And I'm simply not going to print x, right? Because I'm going to print only the numbers that are divisible by 5. And how do you know the divisibility of 5? Is by using a modulo division operator here. So in order to check any divisibility, you will have to make sure you use modulo division operator. I have posted a separate video on explaining this modulo division operator. You can go and check that out. And so if x divisible by 5, in the sense when you divide x, any number by 5 by using modulo division in Python, it is going to return the remainder. And when your remainder is 0, obviously it is understood that your interpreter or that number would be divisible by that particular number, which is 5 here, if the remainder is 0. I'm going to print that, and x would get updated by 1. You have to make sure this is written outside the if statement, or else it is going to update only if it is divisible by 5. But we don't care about whether it is divisible by 5 or not. It has to get updated every time. So if I run this, you can see it is printing only the numbers that are divisible by 5. So you have 5, 10, 15 till 100, all multiples of 5. So now, moving ahead with our next example, this is kind of, an infinite loop here. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to ask the user to enter a password. All right. So once user enters a password, I'm going to check it with the right password. As long as it is not the right password, I'm going to keep asking the user to enter the right password. Got it? So first of all, my first line is to initialize a variable, but this time I'm not going to assign a data, right? I'm going to ask the user to enter the password. So that's what I'm assigning to this variable called password. So the same step, but this time I'm going to ask the user to give the input. To get an input from the user, you'll have to use the keyword input method, or you have to use the method input, and within parentheses you can write the prompt that would let the user know what they have to enter. And then I'm going to check it against program. While password is not equal to program, let's first say I'm going to have program as the password here. So as long as user's password is not same as program, or whatever user enters is not same as program, only then I want the loop to repeat. Once if they have entered the right password, I don't want to repeat further, right? I can simply exit from the loop, letting them log into the website or application. So only if it's not equal, I'm gonna tell wrong password, please try again, and then ask the input again. So password equals to input, enter your password. This is gonna keep repeating until I enter the right password. So it's kind of an infinite loop. So as soon as I enter the right password, it's gonna exit the loop, or it's gonna exit from the loop. Here, the same example, I'm going to check with the username this time, and the username is John, say for example. So I have initialized the variable here, written the condition while username is not equal to John, because I'm going to keep asking the user to enter the username as long as they have not entered the right name. As long as the name is not right? So I'm going to print, sorry, wrong username, try again. And again, gonna ask. So this is what updating the variable here. And same in this line, this is what the updation part. And I have something called else here. So else is an optional one that you can have. This would just let the developers, the programmers behind the screen, to understand that the interpreter is, this is where the interpreter exits from the loop. Also, you can just let the user know that some information that you can add. So for example, since they are trying to log in using username, I've just put you have logged in successfully. So if I run this, so so this is where I'm gonna enter the right name. So it has printed, you have logged in successfully. So this else part does not matter whether the loop is gonna run or not. No matter how many times the loop runs, no matter whether the loop is running or not, your interpreter is gonna execute the else part no matter what. So this is like for the programmers to understand that this is where your loop exits. And next example, we do have the same one, but this time what I'm gonna do is, last two times what happened was I gave a lot of chances for users to keep trying for password and username. But this time, I'm going to restrict that. I'm going to give them only 3 choices or 3 chances to enter the right username. If not, then they won't be able to log in for that particular day. For example, they can try again tomorrow. So to do that, you have to, first of all, the variable condition that I'm going to check is username. Since I have a restriction here, I'm going to ask only 3 times. I'm initializing the variable with nothing, an empty string, because I'm going to ask inside the loop, because I'm going to ask that only 3 times. So let that be inside the loop. So initialize it with empty value and count equals to 0. This is to keep a track of how many times the loop is repeating, or how many times the loop is repeating. So it's 0 initially. You can also have 1, depends. And why username is not John. So initially, obviously, it's not John. So interpreter is gonna run the loop at least once and gonna check if count is less than or equal to 2. Only if it is lesser than 3 chances, since I'm starting it from 0. So it is 0, 1, and 2. So if it's less than or equal to 2, only then you're gonna again ask the user, print your, let me avoid this. You don't need that. Ask the user to write the print the name, enter your username using input method. Else, if not, if it crossed 3 times, you're gonna simply say you ran out of your chances, try again tomorrow, and you have a jump statement. Break is one of the jump statements you have in Python. This is gonna let the interpreter break from the loop. So if you run out of chances, it's gonna break right away. And then the count gets updated 1 time. And then if it's not John, again ask the user to enter the name. Let me remove this. Let's have that. And gonna check again. So let me run this now. So enter the username. I'm gonna enter a wrong name, which is not John. So there you go. And then enter the username again. Wrong. This is the third chance I'm gonna use. Again, wrong. So now you ran out of chances. Try again tomorrow. Now, if I enter the right name in the first go, it's just gonna let me proceed further. Or I can simply use else. Else, let's not use else because it's gonna print no matter what. So as soon as you can also check inside the loop saying if username is equivalent to John, then say username is equivalent to say John. You have logged in successfully. And then break right away. So say I'm gonna run it, I'm gonna enter John. So it has broke the loop. No matter what, it's still gonna break the loop. And then you have logged in successfully. So moving ahead with the next task, where this is little different because now I don't know how many times the loop is gonna repeat. So if you have a situation where you don't know how many times you're gonna repeat a loop, but you have certain conditions to check on, then you have to depend on using while loop here. For loop is always having finite number of times to repeat loop, but while loop is about situations where you don't know how many times you're gonna repeat some tasks. So here my task is I have a total budget of 100, say, and I want, I'm gonna keep. I've purchased, or the user has purchased some items, and it should not exceed 100 the total. So I'm gonna keep adding the cost of the items to a particular variable, and gonna check that against my total budget. So once it exceeds my total budget, I'm gonna remove the last item that I added and return the final cost of the total items without exceeding the 100. So here, I don't know the cost of all the items, and I don't know how many times it's gonna repeat. In such situations, what you have to do is you can use something called while true. So while true, in the sense, you are gonna enter an infinite loop. It's always true, it means. But we do have something called break statement that's gonna exit from the loop under certain conditions. So you can depend on that. So starting from variables again, I've initialized two variables here. One is total budget, which is 100, and total price, which is 0. Because initially my total price is gonna have 0, to which I'm gonna add all the items cost. So I'm gonna store 0 to it. And inside the loop, one important thing that I'm going to ask user is what's the price of an item. This is what is going to keep repeating, as well as addition of all the items. So now to get an input, you will have to use input method here. And again, when you use input method, whatever user enters, it would be read as a string data type. But user is gonna enter some price here. So what you have to do is you'll have to convert that into float data type. So float would be better because when you're dealing with price, it could be in decimal numbers, right? So it's better to go with float data type. So I'm gonna convert that into float data type, whatever input user is gonna enter. So to convert anything into float, you make sure you use the method float. And then total price equals to total price plus price, whatever user is gonna enter here. And then print the total, the price till now that the user has got, okay? And then I'm gonna check if total price has exceeded total budget or not. So if it does, as soon as after adding, I'm gonna check. So if it does, I'm gonna subtract the last price that I added, because this price variable is gonna store the last price that I got from the user, right? So I'm gonna subtract that from the total price and break it. And finally gonna print total price. Your total price is whatever the user has got. So say I'm gonna print 40 first prices, and then I'm gonna print 45, so which is 85 till now. Now I'm gonna add 20. So 20 adding to 85 would exceed 100. So now it has gone till 105, but removed the last 25, so at 20, so that I can stay within my budget. So this is one of the most common place where you can depend on using while loop when you don't know how many times your loop is gonna repeat. With this, we have come to an end of this video. We'll see you in the next video with a different concept. Bye. Take care.